Aarav Malhotra thought he was marrying the love of his life, but Meera Sharma's secret past turned their dream wedding in Canada into a nightmare of scams, humiliation, and ultimately murder. The wedding of Aarav Malhotra and Meera Sharma was set to be the talk of the Toronto Indian community. Families and friends from across Canada gathered in a decorated banquet hall filled with golden drapes, crystal lights, and the soft scent of roses. Aarav's parents were proud, greeting guests with warm smiles as photographers captured every moment. For them, this was not just a celebration of love, but a display of their son's success, a reminder that hard work in a foreign country could lead to stability and joy. Aarav himself stood tall, dressed in a traditional sherwani, nervous yet excited about beginning a new chapter of his life. He believed Meera was everything he had ever dreamed of, kind, graceful, and devoted. Meera entered the hall with dazzling beauty, wearing a red lehenga embroidered with gold that caught the light like fire. The guests whispered in admiration, praising Aarav's good fortune. Laughter and music filled the room, hiding any trace of tension. To the people watching, this was a perfect union, the blending of two lives meant to be together. No one imagined that under the shimmering jewelry and confident smiles lay secrets that could destroy everything. As the rituals began, the rhythm of drums echoed while relatives danced in joy. Children ran around the hall, and elders blessed the couple. The atmosphere was one of celebration, but in the corner of the bride's eyes, there was a fleeting look of unease, quickly hidden behind practiced expressions. Aarav did not notice. His mind was focused on the promise of forever. Yet the stage on which he stood so proudly was already fragile, built on foundations that would soon crumble. What was meant to be the happiest day of his life was unknowingly the beginning of a nightmare. Aarav Malhotra's life in Canada was built on years of discipline and sacrifice. He had arrived as an international student, juggling part-time jobs while completing his degree in computer science. Every dollar he earned was carefully saved, often sent back home to his parents in India to help them live comfortably. His determination paid off when he landed a stable job at a Toronto software company, where colleagues admired him for his quiet dedication and polite nature. Aarav was not a man of extravagance. He lived modestly, drove a second-hand car, and dreamed of eventually buying a family home. What mattered to him most was building a life of security, one that could support his parents and, someday, his own children. For Aarav, marriage was never just about companionship. It symbolized responsibility, stability, and the continuation of his family's honor. His relatives in India had long urged him to find a suitable bride, someone who could understand both tradition and the challenges of life abroad. When Meera Sharma entered his life, she seemed to fit the picture perfectly. She carried herself with elegance, spoke of shared values, and presented herself as someone who wanted the same future he did. Aarav believed she was not only a partner for himself, but also a daughter his parents would be proud to welcome. Friends often described him as trusting, sometimes to a fault. He believed in the good in people, never imagining that someone would exploit his sincerity. As the wedding approached, Aarav's confidence grew, and he allowed himself to dream bigger. Family vacations, a new home, perhaps even starting his own tech company. To him, Meera was the missing piece of that vision. He could not see that the life he had built with such honesty was about to be shattered by betrayal. Meera Sharma's story, as she told it, was one of resilience and ambition. She often spoke of growing up in India, studying hard, and moving to Canada to build a better future. But the reality hidden beneath that carefully crafted image was far darker. Before leaving India, Meera had become entangled in a circle of individuals who specialized in marriage scams. These were not random schemes, but carefully planned operations designed to take advantage of vulnerable men searching for stability and companionship. Meera's charm, beauty, and ability to present herself as an ideal partner made her a valuable asset to the network. In India, she had entered into a legal marriage with a man who was part of the operation, a union not based on love, but on profit. Together, they staged multiple fraudulent relationships, collecting money from families under the promise of marriage before disappearing. When the opportunity arose to move abroad, Meera saw it as a chance to expand these schemes to an even bigger stage. Canada offered new targets, immigrants eager to marry, men who carried dreams of family honor, and communities where appearances mattered more than investigation. Her arrival in Toronto was calculated. She quickly built a reputation as a well-mannered, cultured woman who blended into the local Indian community. She attended events, made connections, and allowed whispers of her good upbringing to circulate. By the time she met Aarav, her mask was already perfected. To him, she appeared as the ideal match, respectful, elegant, and aligned with tradition. But behind every smile was a strategy, and behind every affectionate gesture was a plan. Meera had not come seeking love. She had come seeking security, wealth, and a future built on deception. What Aarav saw as destiny was, for her, nothing more than business. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, subtle cracks began to appear in Meera's carefully polished image. Aarav noticed small inconsistencies that seemed harmless at first, but grew harder to ignore. When he asked about her education, she sometimes spoke of studying in Delhi, other times in Mumbai, offering vague details that never quite aligned. She avoided questions about old friends or family, always changing the subject with a smile that seemed too practiced. Aarav brushed these doubts aside, convincing himself that everyone had gaps in memory or stories told differently under stress. His family, however, grew uneasy. During casual conversations, Aarav's mother tried to learn more about Meera's childhood, but the answers were vague and rehearsed. Relatives whispered about how little they truly knew of her background, yet no one wanted to ruin the joy of the upcoming celebration. After all, wedding preparations were in full swing, and excitement clouded their judgment. The community admired the match, and few dared to question it openly. Even Aarav's closest friends, though supportive, felt something was amiss. They noticed how Meera avoided talking about her life in India, as if erasing entire chapters of her past. She offered charming smiles and polite gestures, but never real details. Still, the thrill of marriage overshadowed suspicion. Aarav told himself that trust was the foundation of any relationship, and he was determined not to doubt the woman he loved. As the wedding day drew closer, the signs were buried under layers of music, decorations, and tradition. Guests prepared for a grand celebration, unaware that beneath the colorful silks and bright lights, a hidden story was tightening its grip. The red flags were there, waving quietly in the background, but no one wanted to see them for what they truly were. The wedding day began like a dream. The banquet hall sparkled with lights. The aroma of fresh flowers filled the air, and guests arrived in colorful attire, ready to witness what they believed would be a joyous union. Aarav sat with pride, waiting for the moment he would finally call Meera his wife. Music echoed, cameras flashed, and laughter filled every corner. It was the perfect scene, but perfection rarely lasts. Just as the rituals were about to reach their peak, the atmosphere shifted in an instant. A man burst through the decorated entrance, his face marked with rage and desperation. The room fell silent as he shouted Meera's name, holding up a stack of papers and photographs. The music stopped, and every eye turned toward the stranger. He declared himself to be Meera's legal husband from India, his voice shaking with fury as he revealed evidence of their marriage. Gasps erupted, and whispers spread like fire through the crowd. Guests leaned forward, craning their necks to see the photographs he waved in the air, wedding portraits of Meera standing beside him, unmistakably dressed as a bride. The documents bore official seals, adding weight to his shocking claim. All attention turned to Meera, whose face drained of color. Her hands trembled, and for the first time, her composure cracked. Aarav's family stood frozen, disbelief etched across their faces. Some demanded answers. Others stepped back in horror, unwilling to believe what they had just heard. The hall that moments earlier rang with celebration now echoed with confusion and shame. In that single moment, the carefully built illusion collapsed. What was meant to be a sacred bond of love and trust had transformed into a public scandal, shattering the groom's world before his marriage had even begun. The revelation struck like a storm, and within minutes the wedding hall descended into chaos. Relatives who had been celebrating only moments earlier now argued in disbelief, their voices overlapping in a sea of anger and confusion. Some demanded that Meera deny the accusations, while others turned on her immediately, calling her a fraud. The groom's family stood at the center of the turmoil, humiliated before the very community they had hoped to impress. Aarav's parents, once proud and smiling, were now pale and speechless, their joy replaced with shame. For Aarav, the betrayal was unbearable. He sat motionless at first, struggling to comprehend what had just unfolded. His dreams, carefully built over months of planning, seemed to collapse in front of his eyes. Guests stared at him with pity, and the weight of their gazes burned into his pride. Every whisper in the hall felt like a knife twisting deeper, cutting into his dignity. The image of Meera as the perfect bride shattered instantly, replaced by the horrifying truth that she had deceived him from the very beginning. Meera tried to hold herself together, but the evidence in the stranger's hands was undeniable. Her silence confirmed the accusations, and the crowd responded with outrage. Trust crumbled in seconds, leaving nothing but suspicion and resentment. The once festive atmosphere transformed into a courtroom of judgment, with everyone demanding answers. Aarav's mind spiraled between anger and disbelief. The humiliation of being exposed on the very day meant to celebrate his new life was too heavy to bear. He realized that his marriage had never been about love or companionship, but about exploitation. The bond he thought would secure his future had been nothing more than a calculated scam, leaving him broken in front of everyone he loved. After the scandal erupted, the wedding came to an abrupt end. Guests left in whispers, shaking their heads at the spectacle they had just witnessed. The banquet hall, once filled with music and joy, now stood in eerie silence, its decorations a painful reminder of dreams destroyed. Aarav returned home with his family, but the man who had once been full of hope now carried only humiliation. He withdrew into himself, speaking little, avoiding friends, and refusing to answer the flood of questions that poured in from relatives and community members. The shame of being deceived in front of hundreds weighed heavily on him, and he struggled to look anyone in the eye. At night, Aarav paced through his apartment, replaying every moment of his relationship with Meera. Every smile, every promise, every detail he had believed suddenly felt like a lie. He blamed himself for being blind, for ignoring the warnings and signs that had been there all along. His once calm and measured nature began to change. Resentment took root where love had been, and bitterness seeped into his every thought. His family tried to comfort him, urging him to walk away from Meera and start fresh, but he could not let go. It wasn't just about the marriage that never truly was. It was about his pride, his honor, and the public humiliation he could not erase. For Aarav, it was not simply heartbreak. It was betrayal magnified under the judgment of an entire community. Behind closed doors, his pain deepened into anger. Friends noticed his silence, his absence from gatherings, and the heavy expression that never left his face. The man who once dreamed of building a family was consumed by rage, unable to escape the shadow of the deception that had destroyed his future. The tension between Aarav and Meera reached its peak in the days after the wedding scandal. Their brief life together inside the apartment turned into a battlefield of silence and resentment. Aarav avoided her during the day, but at night, his anger would erupt in heated arguments. Neighbors often heard muffled shouting, followed by the sound of slammed doors and hurried footsteps. What had once been envisioned as a marital home now felt like a cage where betrayal lingered in every corner. One night, the confrontation spiraled beyond words. Aarav had returned late, his thoughts clouded by rage and humiliation that refused to fade. He confronted Meera with questions she refused to answer, her silence fueling his fury. Accusations filled the air, each louder than the last, until shouting turned into the sound of objects crashing against the floor. Plates shattered, furniture toppled, and the calm apartment became a scene of chaos. The argument reached a breaking point when Aarav, consumed by a storm of anger, lashed out physically. Meera fought back in desperation, grabbing whatever she could to protect herself. In the struggle, she seized a kitchen knife, her hands trembling as Aarav advanced. The fight turned violent, their movements frantic and uncontrolled, and within moments, the unthinkable happened. Aarav collapsed to the floor, blood spreading across the tiles. The once proud Groom now lay lifeless, his anger extinguished in a matter of seconds. Meera stood frozen, the knife slipping from her grip as shock overtook her. The walls of the apartment, once silent witnesses to her lies, now echoed with the aftermath of a tragedy. The confrontation that began with shattered trust ended in death, sealing the story with a brutal finality that no one could have predicted. When the neighbors heard the piercing screams and sudden silence, calls to the police came within minutes. Officers arrived to find the door ajar and the apartment in disarray. The scene inside was horrifying. Aarav's body lay sprawled on the kitchen floor, a pool of blood spreading beneath him, staining the tiles a deep crimson. Meera sat against the wall, her face pale and her clothes marked with blood, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The knife lay only a few feet away, its metallic glint under the harsh light, making the room feel colder. Investigators quickly secured the apartment, photographing every detail. The shattered glass, overturned furniture, and the lifeless Groom who had once been the symbol of a community's pride. The officers led Meera away in handcuffs, her expression blank, as if the reality of what had happened had not yet sunk in. Outside, curious neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief as flashing red and blue lights illuminated the quiet suburban street. The news spread rapidly. By morning, headlines across Toronto carried the shocking story of the Groom, murdered only days after his wedding had been exposed as a scam. Community members expressed outrage, while others voiced sympathy for the tragic downfall of two lives consumed by lies and betrayal. The investigation revealed the truth step by step. Detectives pieced together testimonies, documents, and evidence from India, uncovering the fraudulent marriage Meera had hidden and the scandal that had erupted at the ceremony. Aarav's family was devastated, not only by his death but by the humiliation that had preceded it. The once celebrated wedding had transformed into a crime scene, leaving behind scars that no amount of justice could heal. What should have been a beginning ended as a grim, cautionary tale of deception and violence. The tragedy left an indelible mark on everyone connected to it. Aarav's family was plunged into mourning, their grief compounded by the shame of how their son's life had ended. Relatives who had traveled from India for the wedding now found themselves attending his funeral, their suitcases still packed with festive clothes never to be worn. The community, which had once gathered to celebrate, now gathered to mourn, the vibrant sounds of music replaced by the heavy silence of loss. Meera's arrest shocked those who had once admired her charm. The woman who had been praised for her elegance was now painted as a manipulator whose greed and deception destroyed not only a marriage but a life. In court, her story unfolded like a dark puzzle. Marriage scams, hidden ties to India, and a web of lies that stretched far beyond one relationship. Some argued she acted in desperation during the fatal confrontation, while others believed the entire series of events had been driven by calculation from start. The case became a grim reminder of how fragile trust can be. For many in the immigrant community, it served as a warning about the dangers of blind faith and the risks of rushing into unions without understanding what lies beneath the surface. Parents became more cautious, young men and women more skeptical, and whispers of the scandal lingered in gatherings long after the trial ended. In the end, Aarav was remembered as a man who had sought nothing more than love, stability, and respect, only to have it all ripped away. Meera's name became synonymous with betrayal, her legacy tied forever to the night her lies came crashing down. What began as a wedding meant to unite two lives concluded as a haunting tale of love, deception, and irreversible loss.